Hello all, James here. Now, there's two different strands to this story that we're going to be covering. I would have loved to have covered it yesterday, but I just didn't have the time to do it. But it concerns AEW bringing out yet another damn belt. This time, the AEW National Championship is going to be debuting quite soon on AEW television, which combined with all the Ring of Honor titles with the AEW titles, and the Ring of Honor titles still do appear on AEW television from time to time. That brings the total amount of not even belts, titles, not including, doubling up for tag titles and trio titles and stuff like that, sanctioned titles under Tony Khan to about 20. Now, more on that in a moment. So, AEW has a brand new championship, once again, the AEW National title. And I say brand new, but actually, according to Tony Khan in the video I'm about to show you, who made this special announcement via his own phone and posted to social media, he basically invoked the name of the NWA National Championship that debuted in Georgia in 1980. So we're going to go to the video for the announcement and a tiny bit of history.
I'm so proud of it because I grew up watching wrestling on TBS and I grew up watching you on this channel, and it's really cool being able to work here.
I'm just say Tony Khan's a natural in front of the camera.
And I have to say, one of the great traditions in wrestling, and something I'm really, something I've missed seeing on TV, Tony, is the National Championship. The National Championship goes back, I believe, to when Georgia Championship Wrestling appeared on TBS, the Superstation. It goes back to before I was even born. And if I'm correct, Tony, the national title came to work with you when Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and Georgia Championship Wrestling merged. Yeah.
So we're going to get a tiny bit more to what Tony Schiavone says there in a minute, but I'm going to give you the Wikipedia title history there, at least the first several. So, as you can see probably from the screen, Austin Idol was the first person to win the NWA National Championship in 1980. Now, the belt was contested from 1980 to 1985 in the Georgia territory. That's Ole Anderson's territory, and quite a lot of names there. I'm going to also Steve Olonsky. I don't know that name. The Masked Superstar, Tommy Rich, etc. Ron Bass, Buzz Sawyer, Paul Orndorff, some great names there. And Jack Briscoe, in fact, was the second one. So there you go. There's quite a lot of people to basically be impressed by the names who held it. So from 1985 onwards, Georgia then merged with Mid-Atlantic, Jim Crockett's Promotions, or Jim Crockett Promotions, that the plural. And the belt was contested there for about a year. That was until the title was merged with the US title that was held by Nikita Koloff, or at least Nikita Koloff won the match. And then that title was defunct after that, because why do you need a national title and a US title in the same promotion? Now, the NWA had many territories around, but at this point, Jim Crockett was pretty much consolidating all the NWA titles, and they were all being defended pretty much on his promotion, especially the NWA World Championship, as I'm sure you well know. That's why Ric Flair is often referred to as the last true traveling world champion. Anyway, once again, they got rid of the national title because, they had the US, had a million other titles hanging about. You didn't need them all. And also, you did have to make room for that Western States Heritage title as well, if you can say it. Anyway, that belt was gone in September 1986 and forgotten about for over a decade. And then in 1997, I'm just having a look here we go. It came back in a much smaller way, of course, because the NWA was, a shell of its former self by the late 90s, and it was mostly contested in the Northeast. I don't know who Big Slam is. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. Salvatore Sincere, so that'd be Tom Brandy. And it would, bounce around for quite a while, I guess. It never got vacated afterwards. But anyway, one of the names that really stuck out to me was Stevie Richards. August 22nd, 1988. And he held it for 2 months. First thing I did was messaged Stevie. I was like, dude, you were an NWA national champion. And you went, yeah. And I was like, cool. Bye. That's pretty much the end of the conversation, really. So I don't know what else he could have added to it. But yes, Stevie Richards, of all people, is one of the part of the lineage of the national title, I guess, in NWA. Anyway, I've got another bit of the video to play you with Tony Schiavone and Tony Khan, because they continue to discuss the NWA National Championship, and something they said was, or Tony specifically, was not true at all.
In 1985, we merged Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling merged, and there was a U.S. Championship and there was a National Championship. And these two championships together were put together, one match at the Omni back in 1986, and it became the U.S. Championship. So we haven't had a national champion in almost 40 years, Tony.
Wow, 39 years. Over 39 years since there was a national champion here on TBS. I think it's a great tradition.
So, okay, right. So on TBS, that's one thing, but you have to go back to what Tony Schiavone said.
Had a national champion in almost 40 years now.
So that's not true. There has been a national champion in over 40 years. In fact, the title was only deactivated for 11 years. So actually, for nearly 30 years of the 40 claim there by Tony Schiavone, that's not true. There actually has been an NWA national title, which has actually been a source of controversy because there is a new NWA national champion, and it's Mike Mondo of the Spirit Squad, who won the belt recently, I guess. Here's an image of him pointing to said belt. He's looking very, very big. Anyway, here's what he posted on Twitter. Let me be clear, there is only one NWA and there's only one prestigious national championship that holds legit lineage and has for decades. So to Tony Khan or anyone else confused, here's the legit title with the company it belongs to and the legit national champion. My name is Mike Mondo. My name is Kid. Anyway, that's what he posted there. So yeah, I can sort of actually see why the NWA or people within the NWA would be a bit bummed after seeing Tony Schiavone said wrestling hadn't had a national champion in 40 years because as a shell of a shell as the NWA was in 97 and is now as well, that belt still exists, even, despite the obscurity of it all. But anyway, once again, the NWA, I've covered this in a previous video quite recently, actually, with the Vince Russo thing, actually. And I thought it was amusing that, yes, the NWA had like a bit of a resurgence pre-COVID, like 2019. They had, Nick Aldis, Jim Cornette on commentary, LA Knight, Mr. Kennedy, people like that and so forth. They actually had a pretty, Eddie Kingston, Aaron the Idol Stevens, whatnot, who is still there. You had a pretty decent little roster and great show. And then, during the COVID times, it just all went to pot and people stopped watching. Of course, AEW coming into existence didn't help either. But, it went from that in 2019 to a couple of years later having a 50-year-old Tyrus as the face of the company and the NWA champion. Anyway, we're not talking about the NWA here, really. Because, we are going to talk about the NWA one tiny bit more because it hasn't escaped my notice that the past couple of weeks, the most airtime or, coverage that the NWA has had in over a year comes from Tony Schiavone forgetting that the NWA existed and not realizing that belt existed, and Vince Russo on a random Vince Russo podcast saying that he was half going to say that he was actually right for the NWA when he actually wasn't, and it was actually Juggalo Championship Wrestling. I find that weird that those two instances have done more for the NWA as far as promotion than anything else they've tried in like at least a year, probably even more. But anyway, there is more of an issue here, and that is AEW doesn't need another belt. I'm sure you know that. I know that. I'm sure everybody can see that. But anyway, let's get to a number of different things. The women's tag titles was introduced a few weeks ago, and they still don't. They're still vacant at the moment until there's a tournament winner and they win. But we've got the women's tag titles. Then we've got this national title, whatever that's going to look like. And then we've got the Okada belt thing, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. And then we've got so many others, including, and I'm going to switch over again here. Here's the AEW roster, or the title roster here. I mean, we've got trios titles, TNT championships, the TBS, there's women's, of course, tag team, etc., etc. But then, let's get to the Ring of Honor roster as well. And this is all from the official website, it's not the Wikipedia. That, world champions, women's champions, pure champions, TV champions, tag champions, six-man tag champions, women's TV champions, interim women's title, TV title, women's pure champion, which is currently vacant. It is ridiculous how many titles are in these two promotions that are basically the same thing. I mean, I know they're not, but I mean, they're both owned by Tony Khan, and Ring of Honor just seems to be like a feeder system for people they can't figure out what to do in AEW at this point. And also the irony that I've always got to point out that they've got no less than 3 separate television champions in Ring of Honor, and Ring of Honor doesn't have a TV deal. I always have to bring that up. Anyway, the interesting bit of many interesting bits here. Oh, actually, before we get to that, because we just saw a picture of Mercedes Moné there, that doesn't include any of Mercedes Moné's belts. That because she's already now bringing around 30. Or bringing the tally to about 30, because she's got like an extra 10 or so random belts, not including the TBS or the Owen Hart Trophy, which for some reason that is now considered a belt that is defended, which it isn't. So that brings the number to about 30 that are seen on AEW television. And that doesn't include New Japan belts that make appearances from time to time, CMLL belts that make appearances from time to time, maybe even other random titles from the indies or wherever else that may make their way onto AEW television, whether around Mercedes Moné's waist or not. And then you just got such an exhaustive list of titles nobody could give a crap about, and it's pretty much impossible to keep up with them all. I mean, especially with Mercedes, and I've already talked about that before, but no one knows all the belts unless you're reading them off a list. Now, I was thinking about this, and do you remember Eddie Kingston? It must have been a couple of years ago now. He was the Continental Champion, the Ring of Honor World Title Champion, and the NJPW Strong Openweight Champion as well. And that seemed ridiculous enough, being champion of 3 different promotions, which is basically Ring of Honor and AEW, as much the same as they can be while being still separate entities, I guess. But anyway, that seemed like a bit ridiculous at the time. And then Okada wins the Continental title from Eddie Kingston, and then he defeats Kenny Omega for the International Championship soon afterwards to create a unified championship. So we thought, okay, AEW is sort of going in the right direction here. They're trying to amalgamate titles, because at the time they had, I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, because I'm going to go back to here. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5. So here we go. It's the Continental, International, and TNT. So 3 mid-card singles titles they had, all floating around at the same time. And then Okada here unified those 2 belts. Or did he? Because this is according to Wikipedia, but I'm going to back it up with the AEW roster. Okada is still the Continental Champion. He is still the International Champion, as well as the Unified Champion, which happened at the same time he won the International from Kenny Omega. Those titles aren't actually unified in the same way that you might expect, for an old example, the European and Intercontinental Championships. They were unified. Well, actually, I think in that case, they're unified and then disappeared pretty much. But for the most part, when belts are unified, then they become one title, usually. In this case, not so much. So once again, I'm going to prove it with the AEW roster here. Okada is the unified title holder. He's also the Continental Champion and the International Champion as well. So make of that one what you will. They still have basically almost 20 belts there. So now you've got, once again, let's go back to the Wikipedia, Continental, International, National Championship, and Kyle Fletcher's TNT title, he's the holder of and has been for a few months now. We now once again, in fact, for the first time, now have 4 singles men's mid-card championships, which is insane, I think. Now, it gets sort of weirder, because this belt just already feels like it's going to mean the absolute least out of those 4 mid-card titles. So let me just get this. So I'm not going to play this, but there was a AEW Dynamite segment on this past Wednesday where the Hurt Syndicate comes out and they declare that they are interested in this new belt. And then they are met with Ricochet and Pals. And Ricochet says that he's also interested in that same title as well. But here's the thing. I'm not going to play the entire video for content ID reasons, but I'm actually going to go back to this news report here as well, that sort of just amalgamates what Tony Khan said, but it's going to be defended, this AEW national title, in Ring of Honor, New Japan Strong, probably the Indies as well, which sort of makes me think, well, is Bobby Lashley going to be appearing on the Indies defending this belt? Is Shelton Benjamin? Is Ricochet? Are they going to be all appearing on Ring of Honor and New Japan and sort of adding or tripling their workload for, I'm sure they don't, they don't do that many wrestling matches for the amount of money they're getting paid anyway. So I'm sure they want to keep it that way and not have to do triple the amount or double the amount or whatever. Just work a lot more for probably the exact same money to hold a fourth-rate mid-card title. I'm sort of already saying that this is going to be basically a lower-card title now for somebody to get more experience and bounce around. Tony Khan likes belts. Now, I'm sure people tried to talk Tony Khan out of this, inventing yet another belt that's just absolutely patently not required. Telling him AEW doesn't need more titles. In fact, AEW and Ring of Honor combined probably need about 14 less titles so that the remaining titles are actually, featured more heavily and more important. Once again, the more wide the spotlight is cast, the more diffuse the light is, and etc. So, adding more belts isn't going to do anyone any favours. But even hardcore AEW fans, as far as I can gather, either believe it ranges from this is stupid to doesn't really bother them. No one really seems to be in favour of this apart from Tony Khan. But once again, it's Tony Khan's promotion. He creates what he wants because it's his promotion and basically his toy box, and that's fine. It's one of those things where you think, well, you either watch it or you don't, but it's Tony Khan's promotion. He's doing what makes him happy. So good for him, I guess, on that part. But I was considering this. If you're going to bring a belt back or a belt concept back, instead of just a national title which doesn't bring anything new to the table, why not bring a TV title? Not Ring of Honor, because once again, nobody watches Ring of Honor. We're talking like, what was the estimation? Anywhere between 10 and 30,000 people actually sign up for the Ring of Honor online service, streaming service, where they can actually watch the show. It's negligible how few. Once again, more people watch the Stevie Richards show on YouTube and podcasts than watch Ring of Honor, which is meant to be a national wrestling promotion. So the TV titles there don't count because they haven't got a TV deal. But AEW, if they're going to bring a new belt back, have a TV title, because you can do so many things with a TV title. Keeps the undercard fresh and having something to fight over that isn't going to be a world title or whatever. But also you can do loads of great stipulations with them, like WCW did on TBS and TNT back in the day, or even Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where introduced time limits of 10 minutes, so it's always fast and furious action. Or you can have the champion have to win so many matches in a row, and when you get to that number, then there's the peril of will they get to that number as well. You can have them retire the title as undefeated champion, big money, check, well done for getting that, $50,000 or $100,000 for this wonderful achievement. Then you can have two other people fight for the vacant TV title. And it constantly has this storyline going week to week that just has, a base level of interest going all the way through. Great to elevate wrestlers to the next level as well if they, go undefeated for 5 matches in a row or 10 matches in a row or 6 weeks in a row or whatever you want it to be. I think wrestling is hurting for something like that just keeps the undercard fresh and interesting. Or how about this? Bring back the hardcore title or a brass knucks title or whatever you want to call it, because there's already tons of weapons being used. You might as well make it a weekly highlight, so where it's always going to be in like this hour of Dynamite or this hour of Collision or whatever. And then it's happening already. You might as well have a title for people to fight over where it's hardcore rules. I mean, I'm actually way more in favour of the television title for myself, but once again, it just feels like the national belt is just going to be, it's just another dopey mid-card title. I mean, I hope to be proved wrong, but, I don't think I'm going to be. But once again, if I'm proved wrong, I'll be the first to admit it, and I'll even make a video saying that I'm going to be proved wrong and, happy to be proved wrong, of course. But it just feels like in a few months, Tony's going to lose interest, and it's going to be like treated like the European title in 2001. And yes, before you say anything, WWE also has way too many belts, arguably even more useless belts, not if you include Ring of Honor, but if you just go for AEW, then they've probably got more useless belts, with the roster splits. And then there's the women's roster that they have to have the female equivalent of everything the men have, despite the roster being far smaller because they've got, mid-card title, the top title, tag titles as well. So at least in WWE's case, happy accidents like Bob Ross painting trees or whatever is that when they dropped the Speed show, they also dropped 2 Speed titles as well. Not that many people will miss it, or not that many people watched it anyway. So therefore, that's 2 belts dropped from the tally. But once again, that is the AEW national title controversy, I guess. Number one, that there was already a national title that Tony Schiavone, I guess, don't know if willfully or not, they just didn't probably know, didn't realise existed, that there was a national title in existence already, still, with the NWA, and also that the AEW promotion just simply does not need another men's mid-card title. So there you go. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.